The color green suits your eyes very well. And it's your style. Take it, you won't regret it. The boutique clerk urged Charles to buy the dress. Thank you, I'll think about it, she replied, and left under the disappointed sigh of the saleswoman. Charles was a wealthy woman of 35. She had grown up in a wealthy family. Her parents owned a recycling plant. Not the cleanest business, but very profitable. The woman never knew want for anything. She was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She married a man from a wealthy family. Money to money. A daughter was born into the marriage. Now the girl was 12 years old. It would seem, live and be happy. But Charles could not call herself a happy person. After a failed shopping trip, she decided to walk around the city. Lately, she had been traveling the streets by car more and more often. But today, for some reason, she felt the urge to walk. Probably the atmospheric fall weather created a romantic mood. It was cloudy, but not gray. The colors were added by the golden and red leaves. Not orange, but red. That's what her older sister Miranda liked to say. It had been almost 14 years since they'd spoken. A lifetime. The difference in age between the sisters was small, only 2 years, but their characters were completely opposite. Charles was malleable and obedient from childhood. She did not like to be the center of attention, always strived for comfort, and was very attached to her parents. Miranda, on the other hand, was characterized by a free-spirited temperament and boldness. She was the leader of the school, loved public speaking, played in the drama club, was captain of the volleyball team and editor of the Wall newspaper. Her parents bet on their eldest daughter. It seemed to them that it was she who would eventually become the head of the business and would be their successor. But life turned out to be trickier. Miranda has never been attached to the family and always liked to do everything in spite of it. So after school, she did not go to law school, as her father wanted her to do, but enrolled in the Art Institute. It was there that her acting skills were appreciated. The family was shocked, but the daughter's antics were accepted with humility. "Let's hope you win an Oscar," the father joked. "Otherwise, I still don't know what this was all about." "Don't worry, Daddy. I do have a great career and a great future ahead of me, and I'm going to get to play with Brad Pitt. You'll see," Miranda said confidently. Her father smiled indulgently and was glad that at least the youngest daughter followed his advice and began to study law at the university. Charles was very diligent. As a student, she completely immersed herself in her studies. Not that she liked to cram laws, but this process did not cause rejection, and yet she was much more fascinated by history. The girl from childhood loved this science, with pleasure read books by Karamzin and Solovyov, immersed in different eras, studied the culture and life of different times. At such moments, she felt as if she was transported to other worlds. In high school, she visited an archaeological camp, and it was the most fascinating journey of her childhood. Even though her parents took her to expensive resorts in different countries, where they lived in the most expensive hotels and ate at the best restaurants. It was this camp in the suburbs, where you had to live in tents and eat camp food, that won Charles' heart. She had an idea to enter the Faculty of History and connect her life with science, to stay to teach at the university or in some museum. But just at that time, her sister made a démarche and entered the acting faculty. Charles saw what anger of the father it caused and made conclusions for herself. Going against the will of her parents, the girl did not want to. She was afraid to disappoint her father, and eventually she agreed to become a student of law school. Favor in the curriculum paid great attention to history. On such pairs, the student rested her soul. Charles did not think about boys she had to study. Her father had already prepared a place for her in his firm. Besides, despite her pretty exterior, the girl was very uptight and shy and didn't attract much attention from the guys. They examined the girls cheerfully, while Charles was always serious, silent. But she didn't worry much about that. She was much happier immersing herself in books and traveling through eras. However, looking at her sister in love, Charles sometimes thought about how nice it would be to have a fiancé. Miranda never suffered from a lack of male attention, but it was always very selective. She did not give away for trifles and only started a relationship when she fell in love for real. It didn't happen often, and in most cases guys fell in love more strongly, so it was harder for them to wait out the breakup. That was until she met Mason. He was a charming guy who studied at the same art institute, but in the music department played guitar and piano. The guy had his own rock band that gave concerts in local bars and restaurants and dreamed of a big stage. For now, however, they could only dream of such gigs and the corresponding royalties. Mason was the classic poor musician, talented, with burning eyes and a burning heart and an empty wallet. But Miranda wasn't deterred by that in the slightest. She fell in love like a cat, literally lost her head. At the same time, the girl realized that her father would not approve of her choice, so she did not introduce the chosen one to her parents. But those, realizing that the daughter is not on a joke in love, insisted on a joint dinner. Naturally, the beggar musician did not impress the wealthy businessman, and he did not even try to hide his dislike. "And what are you going to live on?" he asked Mason in a condescending manner. "In time, our band will become popular, and we will have enough royalties," answered the rocker. "But when will that happen?" "If it happens at all," smirked the entrepreneur. "And we have to live for something now. I have a scholarship, plus sometimes I work as a courier," justified the musician. "Courier, but it brings a pittance, and Miranda's used to having everything she wants. How are you going to provide for her?" My father wouldn't stop. "Dad, what are you talking about? What do you mean, provide for her? We're not living in the 19th century. I'll work on my own, and in general, money is not what makes you happy." Miranda was offended. "Daughter, it's easy for you to say that you were born in a rich family and never needed anything. But I rose from the bottom, climbing as hard as I could, and I had more than enough, believe me. And I don't want the same fate for my kids. So I'm sorry, but I'm totally against your union," said the businessman. "If that's the case, I'm leaving home. Why do I need parents who do not support me and want to make me their niece?" Miranda shouted in tears. "Mason, let's get out of here. There's nothing more for us to do here." Charles and his mother, a quiet, modest woman, were speechless. Meanwhile, Miranda had indeed rushed to her room and soon came out with a couple of hastily packed suitcases. Mason was already waiting for her outside. "Have a nice day," she declared to her family and left for her lover. Her mother wanted to dash after her to stop her and bring her back, but her father held her back. "No need to freak out for months in a dorm room. She'll sit on buckwheat and then she'll come running. Nothing, even useful, will be a good lesson for her," said the man. The woman obediently retreated and waited for Miranda to return. But the daughter didn't return after a month or two. The father was also worried. He personally went to the institute where his daughter was studying to bring her home, but it turned out that the girl was listed, as well as her beau. Friends of the couple said that they left New York, just packed their bags, took train tickets, and went to build a new life, without telling anyone about the details of their plans. Miranda could not be reached until she herself texted her mom one night. "I'm fine. Mason and I got married and moved to another city. Our lives are safe. Thank you for everything you've done for me, but I'm going to move on with my life on my own, and I'm not going to let anyone tell me what to do." After reading this, the woman cried. Tears came to Charles' eyes as well. She was very close to her sister and did not want to lose her, so she wrote to her in the hope that she would keep in touch with her. The girl promised the fugitive that she would not tell anyone that they continued to communicate. Miranda believed her and periodically wrote to her sister, telling her about their cramped rented apartment, about life in the big city, about Romeo, the cat she and Mason had. Charles grew warm from these messages. She'd broken the secret and told her mom about them. She had agreed to at least this format of keeping in touch with her daughter. However, it was decided not to tell her father about the correspondence. He was extremely angry at his daughter, but deep down he hoped that sooner or later she would come to her senses and return. But time passed, and Miranda did not return. Then the father turned his attention to his youngest daughter. He began to worry that she, unlike the older one, was not going out with boys at all. "Charles, you've got to pull yourself together. I'm still working on my books. You should go to the salon and get your hair done. Men love eyes. Remember that. You're already 21 years old. Your mother and I were married when she was that age." He admonished the heiress. She nodded obediently, but could not command her heart. She did buy herself a shorter skirt, twisted her curls, went to a couple of parties where she felt very uncomfortable. A couple of young men tried to meet her, but they were so pushy that the girl got lost and ran away. In the end, she decided not to break herself and returned to a more familiar life. She was interested in what she saw in the walls of the university. Announcement of a science stand-up club performance is a format in which young scientists from the stage tell some interesting scientific facts in simple language. Charles wanted to try herself in such a role, but first she decided to go to the show and see how everything works. Together with her classmates, she came to the cafe where the show was held and took her seat as she liked from the very edge. The atmosphere was comfortable for her. Passionate about science, peers from different fields, chemists, biologists, physicists, philologists, all passionately engaged in intellectual dialogues until the first participant came on stage. Hello everyone. My name is James. I am a student of the physics department, and today I will perform a monologue on the topic of the black hole as a cosmic object. But don't go to sleep. It won't be boring, I promise, smiled the guy, and dimples appeared on his cheeks. At that moment, Charles felt a pleasant heartbeat in her chest. She listened attentively to James, laughed at his jokes, admired his intelligence. And by the end of the performance, she finally realized that she had fallen in love with him at first sight and broke into a wide smile. The rest of the evening went unnoticed by her. I noticed you liked that physicist with the glasses? Asked Charles' classmates after the show. Kelly, how did you realize that? The girl blushed. It's written all over your face, she laughed. Do you want me to introduce you? This is my former classmate. I want to, Charles smiled shyly. Something told her that now she had to show determination and make the first move. Kelly caught James in the hallway and beckoned him over. James, hi. It's been 100 years. Great performance, congratulations. This is my classmate Charles. She's into science stand-up too, and she's been dying to perform here. Why don't you tell her how it works? James smiled with pleasure. Which way are you going, Charles? The Lenin district. That's great. It's right on our way, we can walk around. It's not far anyway, and I'll tell you all about it. Charles nodded with a smile and agreed to the walk. Kelly winked goodbye and whispered in her ear, don't get lost. It was September, drizzling light rain. I have an umbrella with me. Do you want me to open it? James offered. No thanks. Charles smiled. It's not raining much, it's more like frost. I even like to walk in the rain. I like cloudy weather better than sunny, so do I. Surprised James and asked the girl a question. You're a law student, right? Do you like it? How can I put it? I find it quite easy to study, but I don't enjoy it. Actually, I'd like to be an archaeologist. I love history. It's very interesting, I understand. I hope your dream comes true, her boyfriend encouraged her. I'm not sure. My father has a business, and he wants me to be his partner. Head of the legal department, Charles replied. I know, my parents are teachers, my mom teaches Russian literature, my dad physics. I went into it. I want to devote my life to science, and my parents support me in this. I'm not local, from the region. I live in a dormitory, and you probably live in a cottage village nearby, James told me. Yes, smiling awkwardly at Charles, as if taking off their wealth during the walk, the young people brought up a lot of other topics. They were interested and at ease with each other. James walked her home, and the students exchanged phone numbers. Both realized that this would not be the last time they would see each other. Their parents watched them through the window. Well, congratulations. We finally have a fiancé. Her mom greeted her with joy. It's offensive to grab, smirked father. Come on, his wife besieged him. Come to dinner, my daughter. Charles went to the kitchen, dreaming. James wrote the next day and offered to see her. They took a romantic stroll through the yellow foliage-strewn city. Stopping for coffee at a coffee shop, the guy volunteered to help Charles prepare a monologue for Poe's next science stand. What do you think? Is it okay if I prepare a text not on a legal topic, but on a historical one? For example, about Antoinette, the girl asked. Sure, that's fine. You have to do what you like, James said. He gave her advice on acting, speech technique, the ability to hold on stage and not to worry in front of the audience. As a result, on the appointed day, the girl performed just perfectly and got a loud applause. For the first time, she felt the pleasure of public speaking. It was especially pleasant for her to catch the admiring and encouraging looks of James from the audience. They gave her strength. Congratulations. Were you a star today? He said to her at the end of the show. Thank you. It's all thanks to you. Thank the guy Charles. No hard feelings? I helped, just a little, smiled James. No, you didn't. You made me believe in myself, said the girl. That same evening, James asked Charles to go out with him, and she agreed. The students kissed for the first time. Their romantic relationship got an official start. The girl underwent a noticeable transformation. She began to dress more feminine, use perfume, decorate her hair with romantic buns. James turned out to be very attentive. He noticed these little things and said that Charles was the most beautiful in the world. She smiled and believed the words of her lover. The guy gave her small but nice trinkets, beautiful stationery, phone cases, books. I'm sorry, I'm a poor student. For expensive gifts I do not have money yet, but I'm sure to get rich and start spoiling you. You see, my developments will shoot out in due time, and I will still take the Nobel Prize. James cheered. I know, honey, you're the smartest and most talented, Charles said, hugging her lover in his small, modestly furnished dorm room. But here she was happier than ever before, and the luxurious surroundings of her parents' house did not bring her joy. James did not give the girl expensive gifts, but attention and care did not deprive. He always met her when she was late, released late, and walked her home, was interested in her well-being, and if necessary was ready to run to the pharmacy. He made sure she was warmly dressed and didn't forget to eat. He hugged her and gave her words of encouragement. When things don't go well in school, it's nothing. You know, the important thing is that we're together, and that means we can overcome anything, he told her. After fall came winter, followed by spring. I remember the Miranda and Mason story. Charles was hiding James from her parents. She told them that she had no one, and sometimes she was late because of extra classes and the science stand-up club. At the same time, the girl continued secretly from her father to correspond with her sister. Miranda reported that things are not going well with them, and they can't build a career. The girl went to castings and sometimes got roles in advertising, but in general she earned a living by labor. Waitress Mason also had no luck in the musical field. He formed a new band, but it was not successful. Sometimes they were called to perform at weddings and corporate events, but his main income came from working as a bartender. However, Miranda emphasized that they are not ready to give up and will continue to storm the musical and film Olympus. In addition, in the relationship, assured her sister they were doing well. Heaven is with the sweetheart, you know. She finished one of her messages. The father didn't know about the older daughter's personal life, but he was very interested in the younger daughter's personal life. You are already 22 years old. You are graduating from university this year. It's time to think about marriage. You give birth to a child, sit on maternity leave, and come to me in the firm beauty. You can't find a wife if you can't find a groom yourself. I decided to get involved myself. My business partner has a son, Noah. He's a couple years older than you. He's handsome, smart, rich, and single. Their family's coming over for dinner on Saturday. You put on your best dresses, please, and put on better makeup, her father told her. Charles was upset, but did not show it. She realized that she couldn't hide her relationship with James for long, but she didn't know how. And bring him into the family, she saw no other companion at her side. However, she obediently refused to contradict her father and agreed to attend the dinner. The student told her fiancé everything. It's just a meeting with family friends. No one is obliging anyone to anything. We're not in the 19th century. I'm sure that Noah wouldn't like me. And I'm sure he wouldn't like me, that's for sure. I have you. But you've got to respect Daddy, she said to James. He was very unhappy. If you're embarrassed of me, let's break up right away. This situation is humiliating for me. Burning physicist, no one, and not embarrassed. Honey, it's just that you have to find a subtle approach to Dad. I will definitely introduce you, and he liked you, fiancé Charles. He was melting, it was her charms. Succumbed to her enticements. The cherished evening the friends came to visit the girl's family. They all looked extremely presentable. Solid man with graying temples, his youth, wife and son, as if from a movie, with a Hollywood smile, spent torso and thick brown hair. There was no denying that he impressed her, especially since he'd given her a huge bouquet of roses. Are these for you? He said to Charles, handing her the flowers. Thanks, but you shouldn't have, embarrassed the student. But how should such charming girls receive such beautiful bouquets? Smiled the guy, which caused the approval of everyone present. During the dinner, Noah was talkative, joked a lot, demonstrated good manners. The head of the house was absolutely delighted and almost directly grabbed his daughter with the young guest. Charles was only indignant and tried to turn everything into a joke, and Noah, on the contrary, did not mind. Your words into God's ears. He smiled. The evening ended on a good note. Noah asked Charles for his phone number. She didn't want to give it, but under her father's pressure she dictated the combination. After the guests had left, she dialed James from her room. He asked her how it went. Oh, it was nothing. Noah's just a regular guy. You're 100 times better, Charles said. Come on, I bet he's handsome and loaded, James said sadly. What the hell are you talking about? Let's go to bed. It's late. I'll see you tomorrow. I missed you terribly, the girl said and soon hung up. Afterwards, she had a little chat with her sister and told her about her father's plans to marry her to the rich offspring of her father's partner. Sis, believe me, I can't betray myself. If you truly love James, fight it, don't give up. It's worth it. Miranda, who knew about her sister's relationship with the physicist. You're probably right. Charles answered her, not very confidently. She didn't sleep well all night. She dreamed that she and James were riding their bicycles through a meadow holding hands. But at some point she lets go of her fiancé's hand and moves on alone. The boy stays in the bright meadow and she goes into the dark thicket. Charles woke up in a cold sweat and, to calm down, watched her favorite TV series until morning. The next day she saw her and James. They were walking in the park. The city was getting warmer by the day. Spending time outside was becoming more and more pleasant. The guy didn't hide that he was jealous of the girl. I'm already finishing university to get a diploma, get a job as an engineer at a good company, and there is a very decent salary, believe me. At the same time, I'm going to graduate school. I don't want to give up science. We'll get an apartment together and get along. And in a year or two, when we're on our feet, we'll get married. I just have to be patient and convince your dad that I'm very promising. James was visibly nervous. Everything will be fine, honey, I'm sure, Charles reassured the guy. The same day, Noah wrote to her, showered her with compliments, and asked her out on a date. Charles correctly declined. But an hour later, her father came up to her room. A little bird on my tail told me that my daughter was turning down some wonderful offers. Let me ask you what this is about, asked the father. Papa Noah is a very nice guy, but the girl started. But the father interrupted her. Cute, just cute. Yeah, he's great. He's got everything you need for a perfect husband. You couldn't ask for a better one. So why don't you just give it a rest and go on a date? Besides, I'm sure he'll do a great job for you. Okay, Dad, I'll go, sighed Charles, who had never been able to stand up for herself. Dad was right. Noah had arranged everything to perfection. For a date with his girlfriend, Noah rented a separate room in the movie theater and put Charles' favorite movies there. Plus, he bought a lot of delicious food. The girl was shocked. This was the kind of thing she'd seen in movies before. It was impossible to say that it didn't impress her. Noah didn't pressure her, but visibly made it clear that he was interested in the girl. Their date almost ended with a kiss. But Charles returned in time. That would have been a betrayal to James. At the same time, she realized that she was actually okay with the kiss. How did it go? My dad asked. It was fine. But no more insisting that we see each other. Please, Charles asked and went to bed. The next day, while walking with James, she was silent and confused. The guy noticed this and inquired as to the reason. I was just tired. Spring, vitamin deficiency, state exams coming up, you know? Charles lied. James remained silent, though he suspected it was more than that. Soon Noah called the girl again and proposed a meeting. You're very sweet, but we can't be together. I already have a boyfriend. I think it's time to call it quits. Don't waste your time on me, Charles declared. I can hear the doubt in your voice, the young man replied. I respect your choice, but I still suggest we see each other one last time. Let's not consider this a date, just a friendly stroll. All right, let's go horseback riding. I've been doing pageantry since I was a kid. And my dad said you always dreamed of trying your hand at a unit. That was totally true. Here they really had such a desire. Therefore, she could not resist and accepted Noah's invitation. On the appointed day, the young people met at the racetrack. The guy was indeed good at equestrian sports, and this could not leave his companion indifferent. In addition, he gallantly helped the girl while riding okay. It was undoubtedly a very happy day for Charles. The guy, as promised, did not give her unnecessary signs of attention, but his interest was still noticeable. Eventually, the girl gave in and outside her house. When Noah saw her companion off, they kissed. However, Charles quickly departed and ran into the cottage. "Well, that's glorious." "Long overdue," said her father, who stood at the window and saw everything. Charles ran into her room and cried. Soon her mother knocked at her door. "Honey, can I come in?" "Let's talk," she said. The daughter wiped her tears and let the woman in. "Daughter," Mom began. "In fact, Daddy and I know that you have a fiancé. It was impossible not to notice your good spirits and outward transformation. We also know who he is, a physics student from a poor family. It wasn't hard to track you down, even though you tried to keep it a secret. Honey, I realize this is your first love. I'm glad you met this guy and he made you happy. But isn't it time for you to break up? I can see that you like Noah. Let's be honest, he's a much better fit for you. You've got a better chance of a happy future with it. Besides, look at Miranda's story. Her father's still not speaking to her, holding a grudge and can't forgive her. After all, the girl could live a prosperous life and not know the need for anything. Recently, secretly from my father, I transferred money to her and Mason using the number you gave me. But that doesn't fix the big picture. They're huddled in the middle of nowhere, making pennies. You've always been wiser than that. Don't make the same mistakes as your sister. Don't deprive yourself. The right to happiness. Think about my words." The woman said goodnight to her daughter and left the room. Charles again did not cast her eyes about. The next day she saw with James. She did not dare to break up with him yet. The guy was unusually angry. He didn't even kiss his fiancée when she met him. Charles was alarmed. "What's wrong?" she asked excitedly. "Stop pretending. I know about your date with that rich guy. A classmate of mine works at the same racetrack where you met, and he saw you forging. Even recorded a video and sent it to me if you're thinking of leading me around." "It's not going to work," James said angrily. "Honey, but it was just a friendly meeting. Noah is in the middle of a pageant and offered me a ride with him, nothing more." Charles justified herself ineptly. "It doesn't sound like you're just friends," the guy said, opening the video. Charles watched it and couldn't find anything to say. She and Noah really did look more like a couple in love in the video. "Charles, I realize that I can't compete with this guy financially. And I realize that you grew up in a well-to-do family and are used to the beautiful life he can give you, and I'm not. So I'm not even going to compete with him. It's your life, your choice. Let's take a break from the relationship and you think things through if I turn out to be more important to you. Do you know where to find me? I'll be waiting. Do we have a deal?" suggested the physicist. The girl laughed, but then said timidly, "It's a deal." After that, the lovers went their separate ways. Charles wandered through the narrow city streets until the evening. Nature was making sure that the buds were budding. Life around was boiling out of vinyl. Except that on the girl's soul was uneasy. But in the end, she decided to give everything to chance. The decision would surely come to her mind, and time would tell who she should choose, Noah or James. Meanwhile, at home, her father announced that his companion would soon be celebrating his birthday and their family was invited to the party. The celebration was at a restaurant. Charles bought herself a new figure-hugging dress, especially for the occasion, and her father presented her with emerald earrings. Shiny. "But I hope that the next similar gift will be presented to you by your lover," he winked at his daughter. The restaurant was noisy and crowded. At the entrance, the guests were greeted by the birthday boy, his wife, and Noah. "You look beautiful," he whispered to Charles as he greeted her. The girl was about to enter the hall, but the guy stopped her. "Stay here next to me, but this place is for your family members." The girl was surprised. "You are not a stranger to us," the young man's father intervened in the conversation. All right, the girl was embarrassed, but stayed next to Noah, who took her under his arm. He introduced Charles to subsequent guests as his girlfriend. At first she wanted to resist, but then she accepted it, and even felt pleasure in it. The evening went wonderfully. It was fun, delicious, and beautiful. Charles and Noah danced a lot, had fun, and smiled. From the restaurant they left together. The girl woke up in Boy's apartment. "Good morning, my love," he pronounced, bringing breakfast in bed. "Good morning," whispered the sleepy girl. "Well, life has made your choice for you." She thought to herself over biting her red. It's probably for the best. James and I really were too different in so many ways. The lovers' relationship was progressing rapidly. Noah continued to make beautiful gestures and give Charles expensive gifts. The girl's father was right. It was the groom who gave her the next jewelry. It was a thin, but very exquisite expensive bracelet. The young man handed it to the girl immediately after the successful defense of the diploma. On the same day, he offered her to move in with him. The girl agreed and moved her things with James. Since the last conversation, she has not seen each other. They studied at different faculties and did not cross paths in their studies. But the girl consciously avoided meetings with her former lover. She was ashamed to look him in the eyes. The guy was right. Comfort and peace turned out to be more expensive for her than romantic feelings. Sometimes at night it kept her awake and forced her to study. But in the morning, waking up on a large bed with silk sheets in a spacious apartment with fresh renovation, she was convinced that she had made the right choice. Charles talked about her breakup with James Miranda. The latter asked her who she had traded the physicist for. At first the girl wanted to lie and keep silent about the affair with the son of her father's partner, but she could not do it and told her sister the truth. "I didn't expect this from you. I thought you'd find your strength and stay true to yourself." It was said in Miranda's frustration-soaked messages. Charles tried to make awkward excuses, but her sister wouldn't even listen to her. Miranda saw her as a traitor, and gradually their communication fell apart. "That's fine. After all, it's my life, and it's up to me to decide how and with whom I spend it." Charles calmed herself. Time passed, and at the end of the summer Noah proposed to her. This came as a complete surprise to Charles. Everything was developing too fast. At first she even wanted to delay the wedding, but her parents changed her mind and persuaded her to accept the proposal. The celebration took place at the end of October in an old manor house. Off-site registration with a violinist and photo zones left no one indifferent. The guests presented expensive gifts to the newlyweds, said nice words to them, and wished them long years of life together. Charles was cheerful and happy only once during the whole celebration. When Kelly's friend whispered and asked her if she missed James. "I don't know," she replied. "Sometimes I'm just haunted by the memory of his touch and his looks. And sometimes I think our union was doomed anyway. Let it be what it is, and life would put everything in its place." Kelly nodded silently and went off to participate in the contests. Soon Charles' father signed a lucrative contract with the Noah family and made his son-in-law his deputy. "Welcome to the family, son," joyfully declared the man, signing the necessary documents, and Noah's eyes sparkled slyly. Charles was in no hurry to go to work after the wedding. Both her husband and father kept telling her to take her time and focus on her family, to the delight of the family. Already soon the girl became pregnant, and exactly 1 year after the wedding gave birth to a daughter, which at the request of Noah named Christina. "I would like to give her my grandmother's name." Hope tried to talk to her husband at the Charles Maternity Hospital, but he was adamant. "Honey, that's an old-fashioned name. Let's follow fashion and choose from modern ones," the man declared. And the wife went along with it. Noah began to disappear at work, explaining that with his new position he had more responsibilities. Gifts and attention from him became much less. But Charles consoled herself with the fact that the candy bouquet period was over, and it was normal for a family to exist without a lot of romantic gestures. The young woman is fully immersed in motherhood. Christina grew up an active girl. Outwardly, she was remarkably similar to Miranda, only to grow up not so stroppy, noted the grandfather. Charles only smiled sweetly and recalled the times when she and her sister at least corresponded. After the confession of her affair with Noah, all contact with Miranda had been cut off, although she missed the companionship of this dear person. However, the young mother sought solace in her daughter. They took many walks, particularly in the parks where she had previously had dates with James. During one such walk, the former lover accidentally met on a picturesque alley where they once had their first kiss. Both felt awkward, and Charles also felt guilty. "Girl?" James asked sadly, pointing to the stroller. "What was the name?" "Christina," Charles replied, embarrassed. "That's a beautiful name," said the boy. "Thank you." "How are you doing?" the girl asked. "I'm good. I went to graduate school and got a job as an engineer in a company. It's just an internship, but they promised to hire me soon." "That's about it," James replied. "Good for you." Then Christina cried, and the young mother hurried home. Walking a few steps, she called out an ex-boyfriend, James. He turned sharply. The girl read in his gaze such hope that her heart sank. But that wasn't what she was going to say. "Don't hold it against me." "Okay, I really didn't mean to hurt you. It's okay," James replied honestly and sadly. "I guess you did the right thing then." After that, the young people went in different directions and didn't see each other again for many more years. On the day of their shopping trip that didn't work out, after walking through the streets, Charles decided to go to this park. She wandered through the same alleys and remembered walking here with James. God, it had been a long time ago. Charles thought bitterly. The mood was melancholy and sad. The woman had been unhappily married to Noah for a long time. There was no trace of the former romance and care. In time, the husband had shown his true colors. He turned out to be selfish and greedy, and on the marriage with Charles decided only because of the bad state of affairs in the company of his father. Profitable union could affect the situation and correct it. And so it was. When the girl's father appointed his son-in-law as his deputy, he dropped the mask. He got what he wanted: access to money and a stable financial position. The birth of his daughter ensured that he and the Charles family were bonded forever. His father-in-law wouldn't want to bankrupt his granddaughter's father. At first, the young mother wrote off her husband's coldness and indifference to the fact that he had to get used to the status of a father and the responsibility that had fallen on him. And she believed that as soon as this happened, everything would return to normal. But as time went on, Noah became more and more estranged from her. Charles complained about this to her parents. "Don't make up your daughter," her father told her. "It's all right. He is a grown man, the head of the family. He has a lot of work. When he has all that money with you, he makes money. He makes a lot of money. Do you and Christina need anything?" "No, so calm down." Mom took her daughter's words differently. She was alarmed by the situation. Her intuition told her it wasn't that simple. It happens sometimes. After the baby is born, she tried to calm her daughter down. "Let us take the girl to our place for a while, and you organize a romantic dinner." When a couple has a baby, their lives change. The woman switches to the baby, and the man often lacks attention. You have to try to remedy the situation. Buy beautiful linen, light candles, turn on beautiful music. In general, do not get lost. "I'm expecting my granddaughter this weekend." Charles heeded her mother's advice and did everything as she told her to do. There were candles, lingerie, and romantic songs. But Noah only wiggled his eyebrows in surprise and asked what kind of farce was this. "I decided that after the arrival of the baby we do not organize anything like that, so I decided to diversify our life," the young wife Charles awkwardly explained. "It's a farce to put out the candles. You know I don't like that. I'll get dressed and let's have a proper dinner. I'm as hungry as a lion. I could eat an elephant," the man said prosaically. Charles was upset, but complied with her husband's instructions. That evening they went to bed unusually early. The next morning Charles woke up with full confidence that Noah had a mistress. But how could she be sure? The idea of talking to Kelly came to mind. After university, Charles helped her friend to get a job with her father. Since then, the girl successfully worked there in the legal department. The buddies met in a cafe, where they spent a lot of time as students. "So, how are you doing on maternity leave?" Kelly asked cheerfully. "It's okay, but it's a little boring. I'm tired of sitting at home. Christina has been here for almost 2 years. I think I'll go to work soon." "I've been sitting around," I told Charles. "I see. But don't rush into it. You'll have time to go to work. Do children grow up so fast?" A friend said. "Aren't you getting married yet?" Charles asked. No way. I have to get back on my feet, buy an apartment first, and your dad is paying well, and I'll be taking out a mortgage soon. Then I'll deal with family and children, said Kelly. There are no candidates yet. The company employs many men, including young and handsome ones. Charles winked at her. Oh, they're all ugly cables, Kelly said disappointedly. All of them? Clarified her friend. Absolutely, said Kelly and took a sip of coffee. And even Noah, Charles asked bluntly. Kelly stopped talking and lowered her eyes to the floor. Friend, tell me the truth, please. I've been tormented by suspicion for a long time. I don't like living in ignorance. Charles asked her. So be it. Kelly exhaled. These words will probably hurt you, but you're right. The bitter truth really is better than the sweet lie. Noah does skip school, and he doesn't hide it much. As far as I know, he doesn't have a steady mistress. But he has fun with girls, saunas on a regular basis. That's what Mason, his deputy, told me. We're buddies. We cross paths a lot on the job. He says that they like to relax like this after difficult negotiations and participate in such parties, both married and unmarried. Charles was silent. Tears began to drip into her cup of tea. Girlfriend. Honey, don't cry, Kelly comforted her. I'm sure Noah will go out and come to his senses. He's got such a lovely wife. It's just that you guys had a quickie wedding. Then the baby almost immediately. He's just not on. Take a walk. It's going to get better soon, don't worry about it. What about my dad? Doesn't he know what's going on? Charles wouldn't let it go. Mason said your dad heard rumors about your son-in-law's indecent parties. But you know Noah. He's got a big mouth. He'll convince anyone that he's right and that it's the jealous who's talking. He's got your father in his sights, Kelly said. Yeah, he's got a mouth on him, that's for sure. He knows how to get what he wants, Charles said, remembering the beautiful words of love he had spoken to her during their courtship. And he had been so convincing that the girl had left James her sweet, awkward, but so native scientist and traded him for a businessman deceiver. And now she cried bitterly and regretted what she had done, and remembered her sister's words that one should never betray oneself and one's ideals. But it was too late. She was married, and she and Noah had a daughter growing up. The family had to be preserved, if only for the sake of her happy childhood. Plus, suddenly Kelly was right about her husband really being cocky, and to the degree. As time went on, the situation did change, but not dramatically. Noah started paying more attention. Apparently, an educational conversation with him was conducted by his father-in-law. However, still their state of the couple could not be called happy, although the visibility was just so rich, successful, handsome, with a daughter. Noah treated Christina well, but it could not be said that he carried her in his arms and pampered her. Rather, he just treated her normally and looked at the girl as a guarantee of his financial security. When her daughter turned 3, Charles went to work. Noah was visibly nervous. Now he couldn't cheat on his wife left and right. He should have been more cautious and prudent. However, his innate resourcefulness easily allowed the man to cope with it. In time, Charles accepted the rules of the game and resigned herself to her bitter fate. Love did not happen in her life. More precisely, it remained in her youth, and in her memories it is about James. However, the woman decided not to despair. She turned her attention to her daughter, spoiling her, buying her clothes, and taking her to classes. As the years went by, Christina grew up and became a teenager. As a girl, she went to tennis, learned English and Chinese languages, played the piano. Charles herself attended yoga, went to theaters and exhibitions, most often alone or in the company of friends. Noah had no time for her. Only occasionally, in order not to arouse suspicion of others, he kept his wife company. Charles earned good money herself, heading the legal department of the company, her father's. And her husband, to give him credit, invested a lot in the family budget. So the woman did not deny herself expensive things and travel. But sometimes, like today, no purchases brought her joy. After a walk in the park, Charles reached the tennis court, where Christina practiced, and began to look around the area in search of a cafe where she could wait for her daughter. She saw a sign announcing a scientific stand-up show at one of the establishments, which was this evening. Charles bought a ticket at the entrance and entered the hall. She was flooded with memories, as if those 13 years had never happened. There were many smart, enthusiastic young people in the audience. On stage was a young physicist who looked painfully like James. Even the dimples on his cheeks were the same. Charles's heart squeezed, and when after the performance he went down to the hall, sat down at a table, and tenderly kissed his girlfriend. The woman couldn't hold back her tears. She decided to leave so she wouldn't play hard to get. She waited in the lobby of the tennis court. "Mom, hi. Oh, were you crying? Something happened?" The girl asked, frightened. "No, honey, everything is fine. It's probably just allergies. I ate an orange today," Charles lied. "Let's go to the pharmacy and get you some medicine," said the caring daughter. And they walked out of the sports facility. This evening Noah was unusually thoughtful. He even cooked dinner himself. And then he and the whole family watched. But at night Charles turned on her side, closed her eyes and imagined James beside her. What would have happened if years ago she hadn't reacted to Noah's beautiful gestures? Stayed with James? Has he really managed to build a successful scientific career, or is he wallowing in poverty? Married? Did he have children? All these questions kept Charles awake, but in the morning she managed to convince herself that it was the past and she should concentrate on the present. In the present, she and Christina were going on a vacation trip to the south. Noah was flying with them. There was too much to do. Charles was used to traveling together with her daughter, so she was not upset. The main thing was to get lucky with the weather. The southern sun and the ocean warmed the woman and helped to get rid of bad thoughts and intrusive memories. The vacation was a success. She and Christina swam a lot, sunbathed, played beach volleyball, tried new food, and took excursions. Mother and daughter returned home elated. Charles was determined not to dredge up the past and accept Noah for who he was. After all, he was not the worst husband and father. However, her plans were interrupted by a conversation with Kelly. When Charles returned, she offered to meet her, saying that she had something important to tell her. The friends met at the same cafe Charles had visited. "I thought a lot about whether I should tell you about it or not, but I decided to be honest with you," said Kelly. "Don't scare me," so said Charles from the phone in her hands. "It seems that Noah has a permanent mistress," said Kelly sadly. "Your husband and I go to the same health club. You know that?" "Anyway, about 2 months ago, I started to see him more and more often in the company of one cup. He looks to be in his early 20s, tops. All sporty, lips plumped up, hair extensions, breasts done. I never understood what men are attracted to dolls like that. But that's not the point. They were always picking out the exercise machines next to each other, chatting sweetly. Several times I saw them leaving the club together. At first I thought it was just a fling, nothing serious. But recently I saw them together at the theater, and my husband said he saw Noah with some blonde in a restaurant. It's all a little suspicious. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it makes sense to look into it." "Thanks, Kelly." "I'll think of something," Charles replied. "No way." "I'm sorry if I hurt you," said Kelly and said goodbye, referring to the fact that she had to pick up her son from kindergarten. You'd think life was getting better. "And here you are," Charles said to herself with a bitter grin on the way home. At the apartment she took a bath. It was her place of strength. Lying in the hot water with the fragrant bubble bath, she decided to think through her plan of action. Could it be that Kelly was mistaken? And no permanent mistress actually existed? Could it be, then, that this information should have been verified in the first place? That could be done with the help of a private investigator. The woman went to the internet, found an ad for the necessary services and signed up for a consultation. The very next day she was already on the spot, without informing any of her loved ones where she had gone. It is important for me to understand, is this really a mistress on a permanent basis, or just an affair? A girl with whom my husband saw once 2 times and forgot, Charles explained. So in general you know that your husband goes to the left? The detective clarified. Quite right, the woman said sadly. Unfortunately, it's no secret to me. My husband has been going out for many years, but it was never about a serious relationship on the side. Just one-time liaisons. But now, according to my source, the situation is very different. And that worries me. Are you sure you want to know the truth? Inquired the detective. Absolutely sure, said Charles. Good. Then give us 2 weeks, and we will acquaint you with the results of our work. It's a deal. I'll be waiting, the woman said. She said goodbye and went to the music school to pick up Christina. Both she and Noah realized how important it was for their daughter not to guess about his lifestyle, and tried to play for the girl the role of exemplary parents who, we are each other. I dream of having a family like ours. I hope that someday I will meet a caring man like Daddy, and I can become a model wife, as you sometimes said to his mother. She smiled back and stroked her daughter's head. The 2 weeks of waiting passed quickly. Charles was able to mentally let go of the situation and distract herself from going crazy. On the appointed day, she returned to the detective's office. We agreed that we would tell you the truth, whatever it may be, and we keep our word that the news is not the most comforting. Your husband does indeed have a mistress, and all indications are that she's permanent. The girl is 20 years old. Her name is Lisa. She doesn't work anywhere and probably lives off of well-to-do men. Now, at your spouse's expense, they met 6 times in 2 weeks at restaurants, a gym, and a rented apartment, the detective said. Well, thank you for your candor, Charles replied, grabbing a chair to keep her balance. But that's not all, said the detective and continued with a slight hesitation. Everything points to the fact that Lisa is pregnant by your spouse. Several times our people saw them at the entrance of the family planning and reproduction clinic. That's how surprised the client was. I didn't expect that. Well, I'll see what I can do about that. Thank you. Charles drove to the detective's office in her car, but decided to take a cab back because she realized she wasn't in the best condition to drive. She arrived at work and locked herself in her office where she cried bitterly. Soon Kelly knocked on her door. May I? A coworker asked, opening the door. I noticed you weren't wearing your face, so I thought I'd stop by. Are you okay? In response, Charles burst into tears and told her friend the whole truth, after which she asked for advice on what to do next. I see only one way to talk to Noah directly about everything and dot the I's. You can't let yourself be led around. If this pregnancy story is true, he's out of line. He needs to explain himself, Kelly voiced her thoughts. That same evening, after waiting for Christina to go to bed, Charles told Noah that they needed to have a serious talk. He visibly tensed, but didn't avoid the conversation. Noah, is it true that you have a mistress? Honey, what are you talking about? You've fallen for the malcontents again. I have no one in the white eye, the man declared. Don't lie to me. I know about Lisa, about your trips to restaurants and training together, if you can call it that. Charles said, barely refraining from shouting and waking her daughter. Were you following me? Noah was indignant. How dare you? How dare you cheat on me? I've put up with it for years, but this is beyond me. Half the town is already talking to you, your passport. You don't even try to code. How can you explain that? Asked Charles. Okay. I had an affair. I'm sorry I fell for a young girl in the audience. But I promise I'll dump her, said Noah. Yeah, she's pregnant. How far along is she? The woman asked. Your men, did they tell you about the pregnancy? Good job, I can't say, the man said. Well, since we're having a revelation night, she's a good 5 months along. She found out she was pregnant too late. She couldn't have an abortion. I'll help financially, but I promise it won't affect our relationship. Well, I promise it will. Charles said emotionally. I'm tired of being cheated on and I'm filing for divorce. I've never been humiliated like this before. I'm done. So you want to leave our daughter without a father? Asked Noah. I don't want a father like that, said Christina, who suddenly appeared in the kitchen. Were you talking loudly? I woke up and decided to overhear what you were arguing about. And I learned too much. Daddy, do you really know Mommy Christina? It's not that simple. Mom's just tired and confused. She needs to rest. We all need to rest. Go to bed and we'll talk about it tomorrow. I will. The man tried to calm his daughter. Tears welled up in her eyes. How can there be any confusion? If you yourself admitted that you have a mistress pregnant by you, shouted the girl, not holding back emotions. What a scoundrel you are. And I thought you were the perfect man. Christina, honey, please calm down. It's not that bad. We'll discuss everything tomorrow and find a way out. Charles, who's so excited, has entered the conversation. And you? And you? So you knew about his cheating, but you tolerated it in silence? How could you? The girl did not calm down. Christina, go to bed. The father commanded. "I will not sleep in the same house, miserable and shifty," categorically declared the schoolgirl. "Okay, I will sleep over a friend, and tomorrow we will return to this topic," stated Noah, packed his things and left the apartment. That evening, Charles had to have a difficult conversation with his daughter. It was not a conversation she had expected, but there was nothing to be done. "Mommy, why didn't you value yourself so much? You should have left right away. Did you put up with all this because of me?" Christina was surprised. "In many ways, yes, we are good. You have to admit that Dad is really caring, and it's good that you grew up in such a good atmosphere. What kind of husband he is another matter," Charles explained. "No, Mom, you can't do that. I heard that you've already told him you're filing for divorce. Well, I want you to know that you have my full support. You're young and beautiful, and you're going to meet a man who's worthy of you," wisely said the girl. "Oh, you're my good girl. Thank you for your support. Now let's go to bed. It's late and you have to go to school early tomorrow," said Charles. She put her daughter to bed and went to the bedroom. Surprisingly, she fell asleep very quickly. Apparently because the decision was final and it made her breathe more freely. That night, the woman dreamed of a bird jumping out of the cramped cage and heading into the bright spring forest. The next day, Noah returned home with 2 large bouquets for his wife and daughter. By that time, they were already awake. "Well, have you come to your senses?" said the man, handing over the flowers. "I was wrong. I repent. I apologize and promise to make it up to you. Let's forget about everything. Okay, now let's all go to the water park together. How's that sound?" "It's a good idea. Except we're not going to take you up on your offer. Neither will the flowers," Charles said calmly. "I wasn't kidding last night. We can't do without a divorce. Christina and I talked it over, and she's calmed down. You can see her whenever you like, but she will live with me. Charles, don't take it out on me. Think about it. Let's take a moment, weigh it up, and then decide," almost begged Noah. No pause, it's settled, Charles declared categorically. Christina took her by the shoulder and nodded. "Think how your father will feel about it. I don't think he'll be happy about it. The unfaithful husband has come out ahead. I don't care what my father thinks. I am no longer a frightened little girl, but a grown-up, self-sufficient woman, and I am able to decide for myself what is best for me," Charles continued. Christina looked at her with admiration. "Well, that's your right. I'll pack my things and go tonight." "Christina, are you sure you don't want to live with me?" asked Noah. "Exactly," answered the girl. "All right, so be it. But you promise we'll see each other?" asked Noah. "Promise." That day, Noah did leave the apartment. Soon Charles filed for divorce. The father really wasn't happy about his daughter's decision, even though she had told him about his son-in-law's pregnant mistress. So what if he said he'd just give her money and come back to you? Then that's what he'd do. You're stupid. That's how everyone lives. You could have been patient. If only for Christina's sake, her father told her. It's for Christina's sake that I'm doing this. I want my daughter to respect herself and take the example of a woman who values herself and does not allow deceit, Charles said in a tone that did not tolerate arguments. She made it clear that she would not tolerate any objections. The only thing left for the father to do was to die bitterly. Months passed. Noah and Charles were divorced. The woman remembered that his mistress was about to give birth, but was not interested in the fate of her ex-husband. The lawyer had asked to be moved to another section of the office to avoid crossing paths with her ex-husband, so she completely let him out of her sight. In the first weeks, it was not easy to get used to the status of a divorced single mother. But then Charles learned to enjoy that status. She was a free woman who was no longer deceived. Charles changed her hairstyle, lost a few extra pounds, and was pleased to notice that she could breathe much easier. Noah continued to see his daughter. Christina did not finally forgive him, but did not oppose communication, realizing that this is her closest relative, no matter how he was. One day Charles came to the office and caught the slanted glances of her colleagues. They looked at her with sympathy and averted their eyes. The woman invited Kelly into her office to explain what was going on. Her friend came in and, unable to hold back her tears, said, "Charles, be strong. Noah was in a car accident this morning. He lost control on a slippery highway in icy conditions and crashed into a truck. He had no chance of survival. No way, Charles replied and clutched at his heart. Yes, Noah was volatile. But they spent 13 years shoulder to shoulder, and there were many good things in those years. Even after the divorce, he remained close to her. Kelly put a glass of sedative on Capello and gave it to her friend to drink. At the same time, Charles realized that the most difficult thing was ahead. She had to tell her daughter everything. The woman picked him up from school, took him home, and only there informed him about the death of his father. The girl was really hysterical. How could it be? "I loved him so much, even though he cheated on you," cried Christina. "It happens. My good life. No one is immune." Charles tried to console her daughter. The funeral took place on a clear, frosty day. The cemetery was crowded with childhood friends, family members, and business associates. Charles noticed a few girls at the gravesite who were unknown to her with sorrowful faces, but she did not feel angry about it. It was definitely all in the past now. A voice in the crowd said that the accident had happened just before the dead man's girlfriend was due to give birth. Charles chose not to listen to these words and to disassociate herself from the situation with her pregnant mistress. But hiding from her did not work out for the woman. A few days after the funeral, she was contacted by a doctor from Charles' maternity hospital. Lisa Ignatova a few days ago gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The labor was difficult, had to do a C-section. Now both mother and children are fine, but she gave me your number and asked me to come to her maternity hospital. She said you were close to her, the doctor said. "I'll be there," Charles replied, and went to the hospital the same day. Lisa was discharged, a grief-stricken young mother, and with 2 envelopes with babies sat in the car of her lover's wife and cried. "What I did was very mean, I know, and you have every right to hate me, but I have nowhere else to go. I'm an orphan. I grew up without parents, so I made my way through life the best I could. Noah promised he wouldn't leave us with the kids, provided everything. I still have some left, but it won't last long. Especially with twins, I can't afford them, you know. Take the kids, please. They're your daughter's little brother and sister. They're not strangers to you. You've got money, you'll get them back on their feet. What am I going to give them?" "Nothing." "What did you name them?" Charles asked. "Nothing." Lisa was confused. "I'll think of something." "Lisa, I'm not mad at you anymore. I'm burned out. But I can't just take the kids." "At least I have to think it over and consult with my family," Charles told her. "Okay, I'll be waiting. Write down my phone number," Lisa replied. Charles drove her to the apartment and went to her home. She told Christina about everything. The woman realized that her daughter was old enough to know the whole truth. And after all, even if she decided to take these children, they would grow up in the same house with Christina. So without her consent, this step would be impossible. "No way," cried the daughter. "We will not take these children. They are strangers to us." "But they're really your brother and sister. It would be bad if they remained orphans. Lisa really doesn't need them. We can surround them with love." Charles tried to change her daughter's mind. A heart to melt, a wicked picture of babies. "They are neither brother nor sister to me," Christina was adamant. And that Lisa should have thought when she went to bed with another man's husband. Now she's going to have to clean up her own mess. "If you bring those kids here, I'm running. So choose." The choice was obvious. Charles cared more about his own daughter. The woman had to call Lisa and tell her that she had to refuse her. She cried into the phone. "Then I'll have to put them in an orphanage. I'll help set everything up and give them the money to have everything they need." Charles said with pity in her voice and kept her word. She arranged for the twins to be admitted into a baby house and bought everything necessary for them for the first time: diapers, milk formula. Meanwhile, a new chapter in the life of a woman who could no longer pretend to be in the house began. And you had to face the truth. Christina started seeing a psychologist after her father's death, and over time she got better. Charles was on her own. Sports and work, in which she immersed herself with her head, helped her a lot. The woman continued to follow the fate of the little ones and buy everything necessary for them. In a sense, she became their curator. 3 months after Noah's death in the spring, the woman's secretary Charles knocked on the door. "Who is it?" "A scientist. He presented a new method of recycling plastic and claims that this development could be useful for our company," the secretary replied. "Why send him to me? Let the industrial department give their assessment. This department has already approved everything. They like the idea. Now they want to get legal advice and understand how to make the right deal with this scientist," the secretary explained. "All right, let him come in." And then Charles was stunned. On the threshold stood James with gray in his hair, the mayor with puppy dog glasses, but still with the same dimples on his cheeks. "Hello, Charles." The man smiled. "I didn't think I'd have to talk to you. You're a lawyer, after all, and my work is in the industrial sector. But your colleagues referred me to you." "Hello, James." Charles is confused. Yes, it's been explained to me. We can't do this without lawyers. The law's no laughing matter." "Yeah, I get it. What then? Let me bring you up to speed and tell you exactly what my innovation is," offered James and began to talk passionately about his development. He led the monologue with burning eyes. As many years ago during a speech at a scientific stand-up, Charles realized that she did not get into his words at all, but just looked at him and remembered their date and kisses. "Well, that's kind of it. What do you think?" The man finished his speech. "Very interesting. I need time to familiarize myself with the nuances. But we are very interested in your development beforehand," Charles said, and turned the conversation to another direction. "How are you doing? Where are you now?" "I teach at the university. I got my PhD. Now I'm working on my doctorate. For a while I worked as an engineer at an enterprise, combining it with teaching. The pay there was good. I earned money for an apartment and a car, bought a house and a car, and I quit. I decided to devote myself to science. Besides, university salaries are quite decent now, especially if you sell patents on your developments, which is what I do," James replied. "Your wife must be terribly proud of you?" Charles gently inquired. "I'm not married and never have been," James replied. "I was in a relationship with one woman. We dated for a few years, but eventually broke up." "Why?" Charles asked. "I realized I didn't really love her and decided not to pursue it any further. She is now married to someone else and is expecting a child. I'm very happy for her, so it's all for the best. What about you?" "I heard about Noah's death. I'm sorry for your loss," said James with regret. "Thank you. Even though we were divorced by the time of the accident, it still wasn't easy for me," Charles said. "But life goes on. I have a wonderful daughter growing up and a job I love, so it's all good." "Good for you," James said. "Well, I'll wait for your decision on my design." "Yes, okay, I'll dial," Charles replied. James had already opened the door to leave, but he turned and suggested to his acquaintance that maybe we could take a walk together sometime, like old times. Charles smiled and agreed. That weekend they did meet in their favorite park. Their communication was easy, as if the years of separation had never happened. They laughed a lot, remembered their college days, were happy about the first warmth of spring, and looked like teenagers. "You know, Charles, even though I'm a physicist and should be a rational person, I still believe in fate and that it brings the right people together sooner or later. Don't you think that we should be together, if even after all these years the chemistry between us hasn't gone away?" James asked and took the woman's hand. James seemed to say it. She responded to the man with a handshake. "We've had our happiness and we've earned it. I was a very stupid girl when I left you, but perhaps it was for the best. We were different people then, green and inexperienced, but now we're older and we've learned the true value of love. I think this will help us keep it." "I hope your dad won't mind me now," James smiled. "After all, I'm no longer a young beggar, but a respected scientist with a place to live and a car. I don't care what Dad or anyone else thinks anymore. It's my life, and it's up to me to decide how and with whom to spend it." Charles replied and kissed James. The woman really didn't care what her co-workers or parents thought of her new romance. The only person she cared about was her daughter's opinion. Charles did not know how to prepare Christina for the fact that she had a new man. So for several months, she and James hid their daughter's relationship, meeting exclusively at the scientist's apartment. So lasted until the beginning of summer, until Christina, during breakfast herself, asked her mother, "But how long are you going to hide like schoolboys?" "Oh my God, daughter. Did you see us?" Charles was embarrassed. "You were walking in the park and smiling like crazy. You didn't even notice me and my friends passing by on a scooter?" Christina laughed. It was stupid to keep it from you. But I didn't know how you felt about the fact that I had a new man." Charles was embarrassed. "I'm fine," said Christina. "And the omelet? You're a grown, independent woman. It's up to you to make your own life. Besides, I could see that you were glowing around him. I didn't even see that with my dad. Yeah, and he looked very much in love. Your happiness is the most important thing to me." "What a wise daughter you are," said Charles and hugged her daughter. Soon the woman introduced James to Christina. The girl liked this shy, but very charming scientist. The man also sympathized with the schoolgirl, especially since he had no children of his own. In midsummer, James moved to Charles with Christina, and the three of them turned out to be surprisingly comfortable. Once the scientist invited his beloved to a jazz concert. The musicians tried their best, and the audience came out of the hall, encouraged. It was so good. "Did you like it?" Charles asked James. "Yes, it was very good, though not as filigree as the jazz cafe of your relatives in Berlin," the scientist replied. "What cafe? What relatives?" Charles was surprised. "But what about Miranda and Mason?" "A couple of years ago, I traveled to Germany as part of a scientific team to conduct experiments. We walked around Berlin in the evening and invented a jazz cafe. What was my surprise when I found out that your sister and her husband owned it," James told me, "but he was a rocker." Charles was amazed. Yes, he was, but we all change. We develop new tastes over time. After the show, I approached Mason. We knew each other a little in Russia. He told me that in Russia their career didn't work out, and they decided to try their luck abroad and made a fortune. Together with friends, they opened a jazz cafe, and it became very popular. Sometimes celebrities even visit it. "Don't you know about it?" James wondered. "No, we haven't talked to Miranda since we broke up." "She hasn't forgiven me for that," Charles replied. "I see. I'm sorry if I hurt you," said James. "It's okay. Hey, do you have any contact info for Miranda or Mason? I'd really like to talk to them." "Yes, of course. I wrote down their numbers," James said, and dictated the numbers to his lover. The next day, Charles got up the courage to call her sister. She told her the story of her and Noah's married life, mentioned the divorce, and told her that she was back with James. Miranda was happy for her and told her about their life in Berlin. The sisters talked for an hour, laughing and crying a lot. In the end, Charles invited her sister to visit. She agreed, explaining that she had missed her all these years. Miranda and Mason arrived the following month. The sisters hugged and cried for a long time when they met. "You haven't changed at all. You're just as beautiful," Charles said, hugging her. "And you've gotten even more beautiful. You look incredible," Miranda replied. The guests stayed at Charles and James' house. Miranda brought many gifts for her niece. She happily chatted with Christina and spent her evenings in the kitchen. In conversations with her sister, James, Mason wisely left the sisters and went either fishing or to the gym. "Sis, how I missed you," Charles would cry. And I told her, "Miranda, I missed you so much." The women thought long and hard about whether they should go to meet their parents. Charles insisted it was necessary, but Miranda had her doubts. But in the end, they paid a visit to their mother and father. The mother burst into tears and rushed to embrace her daughter, whom she had not seen for many years. The father was more reserved, but still couldn't hold back his tears. They ended up sitting quite nicely. The father never admitted that he was wrong to disapprove of Miranda's choice. However, the Cold War between the daughter's parents could be considered over. "Right now, I'm the happiest person in the world. Everyone I love is here. James, you parents' daughter. How do you feel?" I asked Miranda Charles. "I'm very happy too. But for completeness, I'm missing a child. Mason and I tried for years, but in the end it never worked out. We never became parents," my sister shared her worries. And then Charles had an epiphany. She told about Miranda twins, who were now in the orphanage, and offered her sister to adopt them. She immediately rejected the idea. A couple days later, however, she and Mason brought it up themselves. We talked it over and came to the conclusion that we were ready for such an important step. We can give these children much of the love they need. But the babies will give our lives meaning, Miranda told her sister, and they went to the orphanage. When Miranda saw the kids, she cried. And Mason felt for her, too. How could I pass up the opportunity to take them in and be a mom to them? Can you tell me what documents we need for adoption? Miranda asked the staff at the facility. That same day, she and Mason took care of the matter. The adoption process was time-consuming, and the couple returned to Berlin confident that they would soon be back here with their children. After seeing her sister and her husband off, Charles hugged James and whispered to him, "How can you not believe in fairy tales?" James smiled and replied, "It's better not just to believe in them, but to work at making them real."